Anything interesting is about time travel. The artist is a myth. Out yonder they go searching the desert, trailing their organized psyche. The duffel is too categorical for the thimble that is left sprawling and half naked, the outer half on one side of parallel. In lieu of the time, the airborne whirlpools jump back and forth to unburn the minutes. It's clear from the angle what an active choice that the spiraling is a schizophrenic convergence of an extra reality. Her deforested expression is irrevocable and obedient to the double car lingo. The left-behind programs of the go-behind caravan have already begun actively inventing the apocalypse. Pressurized spirals chord through strength factors, receptive fractals with transposed rigidity loft the birds with lift factors of sustained form to protect function from the ascending self-expression which makes a mockery of holding levers from the other birds. Period illustrations cursing and pawing through theta-stated and pocketed credentials, gnawing and nosing into a supersonic frenzy against the Wicca warden's cavernous cauldron where mere freedom thought it was theater. Implode into the revelation of the double and reset to take it again. When you join the game, you have to go all the way. Exhaust every type of strategy, but above all, advance with a mask. It all began with an attack. Physics won the race off the walls and sat smacked and dabbing at nosebleeds. Space-time pilots stick to their quotas, programmed to land in the when and where of the amoeba's sanction. It's plotted by coordinates in order that everything doesn't happen all at once. The rhythmic distributions of the colonial identities are so that it doesn't happen to you. Flight patterns do not circle because they are only paid to deal with fragments. Currency for rituals, rantings, and bees cover the surface of society with a network of small, complicated, minute, and uniform rules of which inbreeding is generative. Maps work better than indices. Bottomless basins of synonyms replace wonders. Telephones are the true masterpiece.
This is a dance thesis to me in every portion, even if it is an appearance otherwise. And I'm a dance major. My minor, we call it a concentration and a complement. But my complement is ceramics and my concentration is dance. I started taking ceramics my first semester here, so I've been taking ceramics my whole 4 years of study. But I only started dancing about a year and a half ago.
This is a dance thesis, and it also incorporates your long ceramics practice into some of the traces of dance performance. Can you talk about how the tiles in the exhibition were made?
This was like a sheet that I laid on the ground and just chucked tennis balls at them. The tennis balls that were used actually to make this tile, these are old dance shirts that I've cut fragments of and sewn together. These are old tennis shoes, bandage wrappers, the clear part that holds the seal for grips, tape and bandages. So I spent 6 months or so training for junior circuit tennis. I feel like the functionality of a sport was really appealing, and coming from a large period of intensive dance training, which was so gestural, I was really drawn to everything having a purpose.
A little while ago you mentioned Little Alchemy. What is Little Alchemy?
It's a puzzle game, single player, and you enter, and you start with 4 elements. The middle object is a kind of direct flow chart. Little Alchemy is a game that it's an app game that can be downloaded or played on the web. That's set up like a single player puzzle game where you start with 4 elements and you work your way combining them and introducing new elements through combination to 580 or some other total. It wasn't so much a roadblock as kind of a burst of like idea adrenaline that maybe this game that I just like had a glimpse memory of playing when I was in like second grade. I wanted to write about it in some carried a set of logic that shared with the things that I was writing about a kind of strangeness and isolated kind of existence that that if it was treated with some seriousness would produce like a very interesting result. It came about because of kind of the strange organization of ideas, and I had already started writing about like various occult notions, or like I guess further than that, like I guess like conspiracy theory was like what I was building an idea out of like this kind of separate things and making it into something that it maybe does or does not make sense, but for them is like I'd say that anyway. Little Alchemy was the bridge between the writing that I was doing and the sculptural work that I began working with. Part of the characteristic of that text is that there's an enormous number of citations, and the citations don't always make sense. They're partly like a byproduct from my process of researching, and partly literal, like I'm actually paraphrasing. Sometimes they're like where the paraphrase has actually gone so far away from the source that it didn't need to be cited anymore, but I left the citation. The way that becomes like a maximalist approach to collecting ideas and squashed all together, they not only strip away all of their like previous identities, but they like take on this new one of kind of lacking anything. Definitely always done puzzle games. I used to love like jigsaw puzzles and like all sorts of puzzles, but the puzzle solving transferred like pretty directly into math. And that's what I came here to study. I don't really like when math applies to things, because I guess I don't actually like believe in math. It's hard for me to like be very sided about it, because as soon as I say that like I don't appreciate meaning, or like I don't appreciate statements, that becomes a statement. And I guess it's like to set up the paradox, and that setting up the paradox is also a way of setting up the rules that are broken, or setting up, I mean, it's a problem in that I'm setting up something that's kind of hard to defeat and like hard to criticize. If I say that I don't care if it doesn't mean anything, like how are you supposed to respond to that?
I wanted to hear a little bit more about ceramics as the making of golems, dance as the making of automatons, and tennis as the making of nothing.
I mean, that's what I mean.
You see what I mean? A project that refuses to comment on itself, which I appreciate.
A project like this asks of teachers to put aside their teacherly repertoire of questions and approaches, and instead engage with the work as an audience. It's asked me to learn a different form of reading. I'm a literature professor, and here's work that interacts with language, but doesn't describe itself in language. And there's been a kind of insistence from the beginning on not commenting on what the piece or the pieces are. I found that really fascinating. There's a very interesting resistance that I think is for the rest of us to work through, rather than to insist on Gigi breaking.
The actual inspiration for the text was a feeling that that's what I needed to do now, and that this was the way that I needed to write. That's just like what was going to happen. But it was also coming with all of these ideas, and ideas about how I could approach thoughts, and like the idea of the artist, and the artist as a form of like person object doesn't really exist. Like they're just like people doing things that are out of context very strange, and that like artist is a way of producing a context for something that doesn't need it, but is an outsider for most people, that it's like an area of discomfort, and that it would make people feel very strange if they like all of a sudden were in a situation to like burst into movement.
like I wanted to bring that kind of strangeness into other like other vicinities, and so that makes me feel both like I'm always performing and like that I'm always like performing what I am, and like there is no constant me, but also at the same time that means that when I am performing, it's no different than when I'm not performing, and that there's no difference in value between those two things. I think that being obsessed with things is the only way that I ever get to them, actually. And everything that I actually put energy into, I'm in some way obsessed with. And normally it's quite single-minded, and it's hard for me to keep an actual array of things going. I find that most of the time, if I have many things happening at once, they're actually the same thing. Otherwise, I'm not actually invested in one of them, but normally they're just the same thing.